I'm feeling high.
Hi guys, and welcome to Jonesin. I hope you guys are having a fabulous Monday evening. It's kind of chilly here. You know, I'm in Georgia. It's like, I don't know, like 65 right now. I got to get used to this cooler weather again, but I'm loving it. Anyways, okay guys, today's video is going to be about Sean Daugherty. I believe that's how you pronounce his last name, Daugherty. He's a 12-year-old that supposedly unalived himself, and the whole case is just really weird, really fishy. Nothing adds up, nothing makes sense, and I kind of just want to go over it with you guys, and I'm just going to summarize their Facebook posts and give my thoughts. And I would love for you guys to leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments and let me know what you think. Do you think this kid unalived himself, or do you think something nefarious happened? Y'all ready? Let's go!
I'm feeling high.
Okay, so here we are, April 14th, 2022. The family consists of Sean, the second oldest child, the mom Ramona, stepdad Jared, older sister Maria, his two younger half-brothers, and their grandmother, Viha. They lived on Sandalwood Lane in Yorktown. They seemed like a normal family, great neighbors, their kids had friends, just kind of like a normal, average, everyday family. The neighborhood they resided in is known for its pristine lawns, low fences, and immaculate upkeep. The parents have since said that it provided a false sense of security. They felt safe in this neighborhood. They felt so safe that they rarely locked the doors. It seems as if they were about ready for a new move to DC, as mom got a new job at the Pentagon. On this morning, really the whole week, spirits were high in the house because they just got back from a Disney cruise. They enjoyed the Disney cruise so much that they decided to do another Disney trip for August to Alaska. Mom says Sean was especially excited for this trip. Sean was a great student. He had several friends who all recalled him to be a happy, normal boy. When law enforcement decided to interview the teachers and classmates, they all seemed to agree that on this particular day, Sean was in very good spirits. On April 14th, 2022, Sean got off the bus around 3:02 p.m. and walked home. His grandmother was at the home watching his younger brother when she told Sean she had to go to a doctor's appointment and that he would need to take over. When mom was pulling up to pick grandmother up, she had called Sean and let him know that she needed him to watch after his little brother, which he was more than happy to do. Before they hung up, Sean made his mom aware that he did have homework assignments due and that he would also complete his chores before he decided to game with his friends. He was required to submit his homework assignments online with him showing a picture of himself holding the assignment. He did this at 3:09 p.m. From the car, mom called Sean a second time and let him know that dad said that his younger brother needed to be woken up from his nap because if he didn't, he would not sleep later that night. She told Sean to wake his brother up, give him a snack, and maybe watch a movie with him downstairs. Sean, being the good big brother he was, just laughed at his mom, told her, "Mom, I'm pooping, I've got it," as they proceeded to get a little tickled at each other. The third time Ramona called, which would be the last time that she spoke to Sean, was at 3:27 p.m., and Sean answered right away. She told Sean that she knew that he was excited about getting home and gaming with his friends and didn't want his plans to have to change. So the best thing to do would be to bring his little brother up with him. And Sean thought this was a great idea. He said that he would get his brother all set up on the iPad upstairs, and the mom told Sean where the iPad was charging so that he could grab it and set everything up. This was the last time she would ever speak to Sean. Before Sean woke his brother up, he decided he wanted one of his favorite afternoon snacks, jarred peaches. So he scoops him a peach in his bowl, sets it on the counter, and then his alarm goes off, they believe alerting him to take out the trash. They believe that this happened at 3:30 p.m. So Sean goes upstairs, gets the 2 bags of trash out of the bathroom, comes back downstairs into the kitchen to collect that trash, and that's when things get weird. The kitchen trash was never taken out. His Crocs were found next to the trash in the kitchen that he sat on the floor. Sean's mom made it known that this was a little weird because he could not stand to be barefoot. So then you're left wondering what happened as he was getting the trash. Sean's little brother that he was watching that day is only 2 years old, but recalls that there was a friend chasing Sean around and punching him. He also mentioned that that man had touched his arm as well. So was someone in the house? If so, who? Sean never logged in to play Fortnite with his friends. He never took the iPod off the charger for his brother. His Crocs were found upside down next to the trash, and the trash was never taken out. And on the counter sat an untouched, jarred peach that he never got to eat.
I'm feeling high.
Maria, Sean's older sister, had left school a little late, rushed home because her boyfriend and his mom were picking her up to go to his lacrosse game. She gets home, the door's locked, she bangs on the door, she rings the doorbell, and there's still no response. Maria called her mom, and mom told her to call Sean and advised her that he was probably gaming upstairs. Maria called Sean twice and texted him 3 times at 4:50 p.m. There was no response. So Maria decided to run around back and try to enter through the back door, and that is when she saw him. Once she got around back, she froze in her steps as she was trying to process what she was looking at. It was a person hanging from their swing set with a bag over their head. She was nervous and almost ran, but realized that the figure was not moving and it wasn't looking at her. She then proceeded to scan the neighborhood, hoping that she wasn't alone, when she realized that she wasn't, and she locked eyes with the landscaper that was mowing in the neighbor's yard. Looking puzzled, probably because he was trying to figure out what she was doing. Now that she knows she's not alone, she goes towards the figure. She came within 15 feet of it and called out to him, but there was no response. She then started looking a little closer and realized that the hands and the legs looked familiar. She realizes it's Sean. She runs up to her brother, takes a closer look at his hands, and realizes that they're both bound to his waist by a belt, and his hands were discolored because of the lack of circulation. She lifts her brother up with one arm, hoping to relieve the pressure on his head, and uses the other arm to call 911. This phone call was made at 4:54 p.m., 4 minutes after she returned home. All she had to do to remove him from the hanging position was to simply lift the shoelace type string over his head with 3 fingers. She then brings him down to the ground and performs CPR for 6 minutes until the EMTs arrived. Sean was dressed in men's clothing, and his arms were so tightly bound to his waist that the EMTs decided to make a note of it, of how difficult it had been to remove the belt. They had to unbuckle it and move it so that they could put the AED on Sean. He has a bag over his head, his glasses are broken, and found in the vicinity. So you have to question, how could a clumsy 12-year-old suspend himself in such an awkward position with a bag on his head while his hands were belted so tightly to his waist without being able to see? Sean was suspended by his chin, not his neck, and he could have stood up and saved himself at any moment. So he chose not to. His feet were dragging on the ground and his knees were inches from the ground as well. And normal hanging injuries were not present. It looks like he was propped ornamentally displayed in men's clothing like a doll. His knees were so close to the ground that you could see the bottom of his feet, which were really clean. How could he have perfectly clean feet if he walked through a swampy spring yard in April that is usually full of mud and dust? Sean's mom, Ramona, arrives home to see her house full of emergency medical personnel. She sees the EMTs working on her son, giving him an electrical charge from the AED, and that's when she realizes they were too late. Thanks to Maria providing CPR as early as she did, they did get a heartbeat, but it wasn't enough electricity to sustain it. They actually found out later that he had been gone for a while and there was no chance for him to be revived. So we have a belt that completely immobilized his arms and hands, a bag over his head, broken glasses, suspended by the chin, not the neck, clean feet dragging with knees almost touching the ground, a string so thin and loose it didn't even need to be cut, men's clothing, and Sean was gone. On the way home, Ramona noticed all the traffic lights were green except the last one. As she sat at this red light, she seen the fire truck go passing by and felt suddenly sick. She begged and pleaded and prayed that they were not all going to her house. As soon as Ramona turned left onto her lane, she saw them all in front of her house. She threw the SUV into park and ran towards the backyard. There was an entrance on each side of the house, but the one on the right was never used because there was a bush beside it and you couldn't tell that it was a gate. The gate on the left side of the house was wide open, but she noticed that everyone was gathered near the gate on the right side of the house. Why? Why would they be at that gate? She ran through the gate on the left and everyone was gathered under the swing set. All she could see was a long body with naked legs laying on the ground and the EMTs working on him. An officer approached Ramona and asked her to stay back and let the medics do their job. She heard the AED go off and saw his body rise from the ground and slam back down. In this moment, her first thoughts were, what was Sean doing outside? Did he fall? Was there an accident? While she's trying to figure out these thoughts in her head, she hears one of the EMTs yell, "Heartbeat." The officer insisted again that she step further back. This is when Ramona realizes that her toddler, Sean's little brother that he was watching, was not outside. They ran to the back door, turned the doorknob, and it was unlocked. She ran through the kitchen, saw the Crocs upside down next to the 2 closed garbage bags on the floor. She then noticed her toddler hiding beneath a pile of laundry on their chair. She picked him up as he started to cry, and she realized that he was pretty limp and just a little bit out of it. He just wasn't acting like his normal self. Ramona ran to the front door, seen it was locked, just like her daughter Maria told her. She opened the door and ran outside and seen a few neighbors. She approached them to ask them some questions. What happened? Did you see what happened? The neighbors said no, that they didn't see what happened, and then the landscaper mumbled, "I don't know him. Who did it?" She then ran to the other neighbor she seen that was out mowing his yard, asked him, and he said he didn't see anything either. All of her neighbors were outside doing yard work and didn't see anything. Their fence is only 3 foot tall. One of the neighbors actually had several cameras on his house, but they hadn't been working for years. Ramona's husband and Sean's stepdad was in Williamsburg, which was 35 to 40 minutes away. So she called her boss, because he was the closest, and told him that Sean was dead. She then called her husband Jared, and all she told him was that Sean was hurt really bad and that they were trying to revive him. He grabbed his middle son who was with him and took off towards home. Ramona wasn't allowed to ride in the ambulance with Sean, so she hopped in the next fire truck and they headed to the hospital. Before they made it out of the driveway though, AJ, Maria's boyfriend, and his mom showed up. Her name was Jamie. Jamie runs up to the fire truck, asks Ramona what the fuck, is he okay? Ramona told her no and asked her to stay with Maria, their grandmother, and the other kids. Still in her military uniform, Ramona walked into the emergency room. They took her to where Sean was being worked on, where she seen nurses and doctors watching and praying. The physician then stepped forward and informed her that Sean was gone. Ramona then decided that she wanted to see Sean. She had to see him. She seen her son lying on the gurney, knelt beside him on his left side, grabbed his feet and kissed them. She then noticed how clean his feet were. She just wanted to know what happened. It was just her, a female chaplain, and Sean covered up to his neck in that room. She went over to take a look at him and thought that he was angelic and peaceful. His face was completely unharmed, no swelling, teeth intact. He was intubated as the tube was still in. He had a neck collar on, his eyes were half open, they were clear, green, and not swollen. She seen that his pupils were blown, and that's when she knew that his soul had already left his body. She kissed him on the forehead, close enough to be able to smell him one last time. She noted that he smelt musty. His right hand popped out from beneath the blanket. She leaned over and put it back. She grabbed that hand and held it one last time. She grabbed his left hand to hold in her own and realized that there was blood between the fourth and fifth finger, and immediately thought this was great. This was evidence. She decided to take her phone out and take some pictures, and the pictures clearly show the marks on his wrist from being bound by the belt, even though that later the medical examiner reports that by the time she received Sean's body, there were no marks. She then stood up, lifted his arm to take a picture, and realized something is wrong. She screamed, "Something is wrong. My son is wearing my husband's dress shirt. Oh my God, did someone put him in these clothes? Is someone in the house?" Ramona then called Jamie, who was back at the house watching over the kids with the grandmother, and told her that Sean was dressed in Jared's clothing and that someone could still be in the house. Why was Sean wearing his dad's clothing? His body being hit by the AED played back in her memory, and she realized that the black underwear was not Sean's underwear, it was Jared's underwear. At this time, the investigator re-enters the room, escorts Ramona out, as this is now a crime scene. Ramona was then escorted to an empty room, and that is when Jared, Sean's stepdad, arrived. Ramona and Jared then went back to the room with Sean so that they could be closer. While they were outside of Sean's room waiting, a nurse approached Ramona with a small test tube that contained an EKG strip, a sample of Sean's last heartbeats on this earth. When the EMTs left to take Sean to the hospital, Maria was left at the house with the several investigators. Maria's boyfriend AJ and his mom Jamie were still at the house with Maria. This is when Jamie got the distress call from Ramona regarding the men's clothing that Sean had on and a potential intruder in the house. Jamie told the officers what Ramona had just called about, and they told her that they would take a look. When they did, they came back and said that they did not find anyone else inside. A few minutes later, a detective arrived to question Maria. Jamie sat beside her just to supervise the questioning. Maria began to detail what she saw. As she told them what she saw, it was almost immediately that it was clear that the detective thought it was a suicide. He asked Maria if Sean had ever tried to harm himself. She told him that she didn't think so. He asked if he had any marks on his neck, and she told him there may have been a mark on his neck the week prior. He asked Maria if Sean had been bullied, and she disclosed to him that there was a situation between him and 3 other girls around Christmas time, but since then, this issue has been resolved. Sean had given no indication of depression or suicidal thoughts. Maria told the officer several times that the position that Sean was in was not a normal position. It was unnatural, and that it didn't look like a situation or a position that someone could put themselves in. He was hung and dangling near the ground, and he could have stood up at any time. Maria decided to sketch what she saw, but the investigators were not interested. Sean's stepdad, Jared, arrived home and ran straight to Maria. He then approached Sean's grandmother and let her know that Sean was gone. She braced herself and muffled, "My little Sean, my sweet Sean." Officers then approached Jared and asked him a few questions. Jared asked him what happened, and the officer told him that when he and another officer had arrived, he knew something was off, so they called the investigative team. "This doesn't sit right with me. I don't think your son did this to himself." Jared agreed and said Sean would never hurt himself. The house had been locked down and the family couldn't go inside. A neighbor across the street would watch, but then pretend to be busy if his gaze was met. Investigators went through and took pictures of the house and took pictures of the back swing set. The family has not been given access to these pictures. A neighbor, Michelle, showed up with some pizzas for the kids to eat, and there was another female neighbor that walked over and insisted on talking to Maria. She was really skittish, and Jamie kept telling her to leave. She seemed to have good intentions, but something was really off. She kept walking away and walking back just to try to talk to Maria. She kept telling Maria everything was fine. She would be fine. Jamie asked her to stop again, approaching Maria, and she and Ramona's boss took Viha and the kids to a hotel. Sean was gone.
I'm feeling
The 20-minute drive from the hospital to the hotel lasted an eternity for Ramona and Jared. Once they got to the hotel, hugs and kisses were exchanged. Jared's phone then rang and he walked away to handle the phone call. Maria then scooped up her youngest son and asked him what he did with Sean today. He said a friend came over and was punching Sean and proceeded to demonstrate punching motion. After this, Jared returned from his phone call, letting them know that the investigators had cleared the house and they could go back in. A family decision was made to return to the home. When they pulled up, nothing seemed out of place and the neighborhood was eerily quiet. They grabbed the kids and walked inside. A few things immediately felt out of place. Ramona moved slowly to the kitchen and noticed the uneaten peach in the bowl. She then noticed the 2 trash bags tied up on the floor and Sean's Crocs upside down on the floor in front of him. She opened the trash drawer and saw that it was lined with new bags. Sean had gathered the trash and put new bags in, but left the old bags tied on the floor. There were also 2 additional garbage bags on the floor, all ripped up. "These aren't ours," she said as she picked up the bag with bluish handles. She only bought bags with red handles. These bags also had large rips in the middle and on the side. Whose bags are these? Everything just felt wrong. More things felt out of place, but everyone was exhausted and ready for bed. Ramona and Jared then walked upstairs to look around. The house was really hot upstairs and the thermostat was set to 85. Who changed the thermostat? Ramona moved towards the bedroom and gasped when she entered. In the middle of the path from the bedroom door to the attached master bathroom, Sean's underwear were on the floor. Jared then ran downstairs and grabbed gloves and a large Ziploc bag, and Ramona bagged them for the investigators. Why would Sean's underwear be on the floor in their room? Jared's dresser drawers were also open. What happened in this room? Jared called the police immediately and asked them to send a patrol car. They didn't feel safe. What if the person who hurt Sean came back? Jared then locked all the doors and put chairs against them as a barricade. He can't believe they never invested in a security system. They go to bed, but no one can settle. The room is filled with tears and quiet sobs. Ramona makes her way to Sean's room, looks up on the top bunk, and sees the disheveled, unmade bed that he had jumped out of. His AirPods were charging, and she wondered where the investigators had found his phone. They told her in his room, but where? Why wasn't it on him? What happened to Sean? The next morning, they all woke up, hoping it was just a nightmare, but Sean was still gone. Jared then called the investigators to come pick up the underwear that they had found the night before. Brittany's boyfriend AJ's mom, Jamie, showed up at the house that morning with breakfast. She made it there before investigators. On her way, she had called the high school guidance counselor to let her know that Sean had passed away the night before and that Maria and AJ would not be in school that day, probably not for a few more days, and would probably need extra help when they got back. Jamie came in, started cleaning up the kitchen for Ramona, and noticed a large handprint on the window of the back of the door. It's a really large print in a really weird spot. Why is it so high? For what? She put her hand up to the print and seen that it was much larger than her own hand. She then called Ramona over to take a look. Ramona agreed that it was an adult print and didn't belong to anyone in the house. And it looked like there was something on the hand, a residue or film of some sort that made the handprint really stand out. She decided she would show the investigators when they arrived. At this point, Ramona showed Jamie the garbage bags with the bluish handles, and they both went through all the boxes of trash bags in the house. They all had red handles, as Ramona only shopped at Costco and would buy hundreds at a time. So where did these bags come from? The investigative team arrived to the house. Some went upstairs, some went to the backyard. There were two that sat at the dining room table and interviewed both Maria and Ramona. They asked if Sean had any enemies. Had he been bullied? Had he mentioned he had a bad day at school? They then showed Ramona a video of Sean walking the hall with a buddy at the middle school, and nothing seemed out of the norm. He was bouncing around and joking with his friend. This helped them identify the jacket, flannel, and shorts he was wearing that day. The selfie he took when submitting his homework identified the shirt he was wearing. The jacket and flannel were found hanging together in the house, but they couldn't locate the shirt and shorts. What happened to Sean? The investigators had taken Sean's iPhone, laptop, and iPad the night before. They asked if the family knew the passcode, but they couldn't figure it out. The investigators said that they would take care of it. Ramona then asked them if they would be contacting his friends. They said that they would, so she gave him the contact information for his close buddies. Jamie was still in the kitchen, washing dishes at the sink, and eavesdropping. She couldn't help but think that they were not taking the family's concerns seriously, as each response from the investigators seemed to poo-poo the family and circle back to unaliving. She was confused as to why they weren't acknowledging the family's concerns. Ramona then asked the investigators to take the underwear she found the night before. They reluctantly took them but did not provide a receipt. She also pointed out the handprint on the back door and asked them to lift the prints to see if they could find a match. There hadn't been any fingerprints taken the night before, and she couldn't understand why. They then lifted the fingerprints and said they would send them out for testing. The investigators congregated underneath the swing set for a few minutes and had a discussion. They left the family without any direction, guidance, or any answers whatsoever. Was there even an investigation? Why are they leaving? Ramona and Jamie then went out into the backyard and started looking at all the houses with second floors. They counted 6. 6 houses with a direct line of sight into the yard at all times from the second floor. Who was watching? Ramona then called the FBI. A few weeks later, the lead investigator told them that they did get a good print from the lift of the hand, but that there weren't any matches in the system. A month later, when they came back for more prints, he said there weren't any good prints lifted and therefore nothing viable to test. The family doesn't even know if the initial handprint really was sent out for testing, and they haven't been given any documentation to support that it was. Sean's underwear were also never sent out for testing, and they don't know what happened to those either.
I'm feeling
It was the next afternoon after Sean had passed. The investigators were at the house again, but before they left, they advised Ramona and Jared against disclosing details of the incident to anyone. Rumors were flying as neighbors whispered about what had happened. Why wasn't this on the news? Concerned community members were calling the sheriff's office and being told that there was nothing to be afraid of. Investigators made their way to the high school to assure the staff that there was no threat to the community. An enormous amount of time and energy was directed towards controlling the narrative on the day after the death, rather than towards an investigation on the death. The investigators had called Jared a few times to talk about the items that Sean was dressed in, and also the bag that was found on his head. They explained that it was a silver gray bag with a black showy on it. Jared then realized it was the old motorcycle helmet bags that he had in the garage for Goodwill. Ramona and Jared then went into the garage to see if they were missing. There was only one missing, one still there, but missing the string. And there were 2 total. Someone had taken the string out of 2 bags to suspend Sean, but left the second bag in the garage. If Sean wanted to unalive himself, he knew there were boxes and duffels of rope, cords, and military-grade 550 paracord all over the garage. It seemed like someone opened the door of the garage in a rush, grabbed the first thing they could find. And there were also a bunch of their boots in the garage that had been partially unlaced. Was someone trying to use those strings and realized that they wouldn't work? Or was someone trying to put boots on Sean? Sean also had his own drawstring gym bags in his room. Why would he not just use one of those? Why would he not grab a necktie while allegedly dressing himself in his stepfather's clothes? Remember, Ramona had taken pictures of Sean that night in the hospital, but those pictures only showed the dress shirt he was wearing. They didn't have any pictures of the denim pants. So the investigators described the pants to the family, and they came to the conclusion that those were Jared's jeans. They were never even shown a picture of either the pants or the belt. The family have never been given a chance to identify them and still haven't been given access to that discovery. Why aren't the investigators canvassing the neighborhood? Why aren't they being asked for their security footage? Shouldn't we be pulling every camera on the lane to see if there were cars or walkers in the area at that time? Why wasn't anyone doing anything? Jamie was leaving the house to go to the school to pick up her own children. As she was leaving, she received a phone call on her cell phone from the investigator who had questioned Maria the night before. He told her not to speak to anyone about the case. No gossip, no calls, no social media. This made her feel sick. He told her that he had been flooded with phone calls that were impeding his ability to do this job, but she hadn't spoken to anyone except the guidance counselor that morning. Were they really not going to tell the neighbors what happened? Why was this all a secret?
I'm fading.
On April 15th, the day after Sean's death, rumors were flying. Neighbors witnessed the chaos and wanted to know more information. Teachers at the high school had caught wind of what happened, and the school notified the sheriff's office. The sheriff's office sent a representative to assure the teachers that staff there was no threat to the community. Damage control was in full effect less than 24 hours after Sean's death. Over the weekend, things got more and more strange for the family. Meals and flowers from close neighbors were arriving, but the school hadn't notified classmates of what had happened. The family received inquiries, worried phone calls, and messages from social media of people that heard something had happened but didn't know exactly what. Community members who called the sheriff's office were again told there was nothing to be concerned about. Ramona framed her favorite picture of Sean and stood it at the base of the tree in front of the house with a candle. Neighbors began leaving flowers, trinkets, and messages for Sean. Local churches and suicide grief groups reached out to offer condolences and support, but Ramona and Jared stated that they didn't believe that this was unaliving, and they were constantly met with resistance. They were told it's typical of a family to be in denial after losing a loved one to suicide, and it could take years to make peace with it. Everyone seemed to know better than them, and no one was taking the time to actually listen to what the family was saying. An investigator hand-delivered Sean's glasses in good intentions in case the family wanted to bury them with Sean. However, the family couldn't figure out why the glasses weren't being treated as evidence. The investigator stated that he didn't know where the lens was. It wasn't in the bag, and they weren't tagged. Later, the parents asked if they had been tested, and they were told, of course they were. On Monday, April 18th, a sheriff's office visited Sean's classes and informed them of Sean's passing. On Tuesday, April 19th, all of Sean's classes had been addressed. They sent out emails and voice messages. Ramona then received a single phone call that had all of Sean's core 6th grade teachers on the line at the same time. They could not believe that Sean would kill himself and expressed their doubt. He had submitted his homework that afternoon, had walked with them to class, and was in a great mood that day. They were all in shock. Sean's peers were interviewed, but Ramona and Jared requested they talk to his best friend. Parents later would call Ramona and tell her that the line of questioning made them uncomfortable and that it made them feel like they were only looking at suicide as a manner of death. Nothing made sense. Over the weekend, Ramona and Jared visited neighbors and asked if they had seen anything on their security cameras. They also asked if the investigators had requested the footage, and they all said that they hadn't. They asked them to please watch their recordings from Thursday and to let them know if they've seen anything. Why are they the ones canvassing the neighborhood? They didn't understand why the investigators had not spoken to the neighbors yet. A few neighbors also posted on the HOA social media group asking for video. The page received a still screenshot from a house on Sandalwood with the landscaper's truck in front of Sean's house, time-stamped at 4:36 p.m. April 14th, 2022, the day Sean was murdered, and it was 13 minutes before Maria got home. They asked the neighbor for the full video several times, but were never given the footage. Ramona and Jared had had several calls with the medical examiner regarding her findings. The lead investigator was listed on the autopsy as present during the exam, as well as the person who brought evidence to the ME for measurements. The ME was given the string that had been found on Sean's neck, the articles of clothing on his body, and the belt that had tied his arms down. She sent off several samples for testing and also completed a perk test. Once the ME was done with the body, it was released and driven down to Southern Pines, North Carolina for the funeral. The family packed up their SUV and drove home to North Carolina, unable to divert their eyes from the one empty seat in the back, Sean's.